This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. I am your host, Darren McKee, and with me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, cuboids?
Christina Roach.
Hey everyone.
And producer Pat.
Hi guys.
Happy holidays, everyone. We have a great show for you today. Cristina has a segment on whether Coca-Cola invented the modern Santa Claus image. And then Adam is going to talk to us about 8 billion people.
That's right.
But first, if you happen to be listening to the last show, we were playing around with ChatGPT, one of these language models, and I was curious if there's something Christmassy related. So I put in a request for a poem about rationality, but in the style of The Night Before Christmas. I'm just going to read a few lines of it now.
It already sounds delicious.
'Twas the night before rationality, and all through the mind, not a thought was chaotic, but organized and aligned. The logic was hung by the chimney with care, in the hopes that clear thinking soon would be there. The thinkers were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of data danced in their heads. And I in my robe, with my coffee in hand, prepared to analyze and understand. And then, to be honest, it kind of blends into the poem itself.
Oh, such a great start.
I know, it's baked. Sure. I think if I filled it with it, you could get something more, but Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Christina, talk to us about Coca-Cola and Santa.
Well, the Christmas season is upon us here in North America and many parts of the world, which means we are being bombarded with Yuletide advertising and iconic images of the holiday everywhere we turn. And no image may be as iconic, at least in the secular and consumer world, than the big man himself, his holly jolliness, Santa Claus. I'll bet when I say Santa Claus, a pretty clear image comes to your mind. A rotund, cheery-looking man with a white beard, rosy cheeks, and a red suit, seemingly held together or held up by a big buckled belt. And for many of us, this image of Santa Claus is inextricably tied to the advertising harbinger of the season, Coca-Cola. In fact, many people still believe that Coca-Cola created the iteration of Santa Claus we know today. I mean, red can, red suit, case closed, right?
I just think they created polar bears.
Yeah, that too. So we actually have covered this in the past. OG TRC founder John Abrams covered it in a very, very, very early episode before I was even a twinkle in this podcast's eye. I'm seeing it pop up a lot lately, and I thought I'd revisit it since 'tis the season. And as always, whatever I cite can be found in the show notes at trcpodcast.com.
That's a great website.
It is a great website. Our old stalwart Snopes published an article many years back titled, "Did Coca-Cola Invent the Modern Image of Santa Claus?" And other outlets have covered the myth in detail more recently because it just won't go away. In 2021, a Sicilian bishop, Antonio Stagliano, told a group of children that Santa did not exist, and his red costume had been chosen by Coca-Cola for publicity. As you can imagine, this didn't go over well with the parents. The communications director for the Diocese of Noto had to step in to smooth things over, issuing an apology stating, I'll try to get through this without laughing.
Apologizing to the Coca-Cola company?
Yeah, no, to the parents. First of all, on behalf of the bishop, I express my sorrow for this declaration, which has created disappointment in the little ones. This really happened. Mm-hmm. Anyways, he went on to clarify that the bishop was only trying to get the children to, quote, reflect about the meaning of Christmas. And the bishop defended himself in a newspaper interview stating he hadn't really told the kids that Santa did not exist, but that there was a need to distinguish what is real from what is not. Oh, the irony.
I was about to say. It is an important message, regardless of who says it.
Yeah. Even the first two suggestions Google spits out if you start typing did cola are, did Coca-Cola invent Santa Claus? And did Coca-Cola make Santa red? Now, I never thought Coke invented Santa Claus, but I may have considered it plausible that they gave him a new makeover, to be honest, before I dug into this.
I'm still stuck on the church stuff. Like, doesn't the world have real problems?
Quite frankly, I'm still bothered by a blimp being a bird.
That's a callback, everyone. In reality checkers, the ubiquitous image of a jolly large man in a red and white suit was pretty common before Coke co-opted and popularized it. Now, a little history on the beloved figure. The origin story traces back to the 3rd century when a monk named St. Nicholas was born around 280 CE in Patara, an ancient city found in modern-day Turkey. He was known to embody the spirit of giving. He lived humbly. He actually used the inheritance from his wealthy parents to help the less fortunate. And he was the most popular saint during the Renaissance and was canonized by Pope Eugene IV in 1446, becoming known as the patron saint for children and sailors. Sailors, for some reason, I don't remember.
Children and sailors.
There's a reason I don't remember why.
The patron saint of quality shoes and pumpkin pie.
The anniversary of his death, December 6th, was celebrated in Europe, and he was especially popular in Holland. When European immigrants came to North America, they brought their holiday traditions with them, of course, and many Dutch families in New York in the late 1700s were reported to gather every December 6th to honor St. Nick, and by the end of the 18th century, he grew in popularity in America. In fact, it is reported that the name Santa Claus evolved from his Dutch nickname Sinterklaas, which is short for Sint Nicolaas, which in Dutch translates to St. Nicholas. Any Dutch listeners out there, I'd love to hear from you. Over time, St. Nicholas's appearance and backstory evolved to the Santa Claus we know today, and although it's impossible to pinpoint its creation to one person, there are certainly some people who were influential in modern Santa's formation. A couple of cited sources, there's more, but these are two of the cited sources, writer Clement Clark Moore and editorial cartoonist Thomas Nast. Now, Moore penned the 1822 poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, aka Twas the Night Before Christmas, describing St. Nick as a chubby, jolly old elf with a white beard dressed in fur. Nast first drew Santa Claus in an 1863 Civil War era cartoon for Harper's Weekly, donning a suit of stars and stripes. Due to its popularity, he continued the tradition of drawing Santa each year, and his 1881 Santa cartoon, titled Merry Old Santa Claus, was pretty reminiscent of our modern-day iteration. Now, in the early 1930s, Coke Inc. was brainstorming ideas to deal with the decline of soft drink sales during winter months. I guess that makes sense, right? You're not really wanting a cold drink when it's cold outside.
Good point, yeah.
Never really thought about that. They commissioned a commercial illustrator named Haddon Sundblom, who used Moore's poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, as inspo. Slap a Don Draper-worthy slogan on the ad, the pause that refreshes, and that, my friends, is how a cold soft drink became synonymous with Christmas time. Now, as iconic as Sundblom's Santa Claus is, there were ads long before showing bearded Santas in red suits. Snopes includes posters from 1906, 1908, and 1925 that are the predecessors to Coke's version. So, although we have to give Coke major props for cementing the modern-day image in our collective consciousness, they certainly didn't create it. The jolly, rosy-cheeked, red and white suited Santa existed long before Coke featured him in print ads. And as Snopes amusingly says, he had already supplanted a bevy of competitors to become the standard representation of Santa Claus before he began his tenure as a pitchman for Coke. I just love the idea of seeing Santa Claus as a pitchman for something.
Mm-hmm. Christina, that's certainly interesting. I didn't think Coke came up with it. The whole time I kept thinking about some vague memory I have of one variant of a historical Santa Claus was like the more malicious. It would take kids away in a sack and beat them. Is this one version of Sinterklaas? Am I making this up?
I've never heard of that.
I think I came across, you know what, Darren? You got something there. I think I came across Evil Santa because there's so many iterations of the legend until it evolved to what we know now. But I think you've got some. There was something about a Santa Claus being kind of naughty with the kids.
And that was written by the Grimm brothers, I assume.
Yeah.
Or the Brothers Grimm?
Yeah.
Oh.
Am I thinking about Krampus?
Oh, yes, must be Krampus.
The horrific Christmas beast.
Yes.
So yes, the half goat, half demon. Dark hair, fangs, anti-St. Nicholas with a chain and bells, along with a birch of sticks meant to swat naughty children. He then hauls the kids down to the underworld. My bad, Santa. I didn't mean to confuse you with Krampus.
It's a little worse than coal.
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh, I didn't get a sleigh, and I got coal, and I got dragged to the underworld.
I don't want this cold beverage in winter. Well, Krampus is something warmer for you in hell.
What's the population of the Earth? Did you finally get used to saying 7 billion instead of 6? Well, it's time to start saying 8. Sort of. When did it even cross 8 billion? Or when will it cross 8 billion? A few times this year I've seen the claim that we had just, or we're just about to cross the 8 billion people on Earth mark.
Adam, all the late night shows covered it. All of them. Colbert and
Really?
It's like we're 8 billion now, baby. Yeah.
So they presented it as if it was true and factual, that it was like it happened on that specific day on the 15th of November?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. So I've seen it a few times this year. More recently, it's been very specifically stated. For example, a CNN article, so supposedly respectable CNN stated, and I quote, "The world's population will reach 8 billion on Tuesday." That was Tuesday, November 15th, right? So what's the source of the specific number, which has been refuted many times, late night shows, news, everywhere? Well, in this case, it's a population estimate by the UN, the United Nations. So they really did hype this particular day, calling it the Day of 8 billion. In an article written on November 1st, they state on November 15th, 2022, the world's population is projected to reach 8 billion people. Keyword being projected, which I would dare to say is an honest enough way to say what is actually happening here. So if it's good enough for the cable news network and Stephen Colbert and all these people and the United Nations, is that really the day that the population crossed 8 billion? Now, I've looked at a similar question before. We've been doing this podcast for a while, and on episode 165 back in 2011, I looked at the Earth's population crossing 7 billion. And then, again, it was estimated by the UN to happen on October 31st, 2011. My takeaway at the time was that we don't really know the exact time at which such a milestone will be crossed. So, how did we even get an accurate estimate of the world population in the first place? Well, the trick is that it isn't that accurate. So, historically, we didn't have a great idea. The further we go back, the lower our confidence in the population estimates become. It was uncommon to have an accurate census until the late 18th century. Going back to the year 1 AD, there's an uncertainty of about 50%. And further back to things like 10,000 BC, the range is a factor of 10. So basically we say it's between 1 and 10 million people that were on Earth in that case.
You go much further back, people couldn't count, so it was much worse.
I only have 10 fingers. What do you want me to do?
1, 2, many. There are many.
There's at least 2, because we're talking about it.
It'd be also funny. It's like Adam and Eve, like there's a range of 50%. Well, that snake maybe counts. I don't know.
Yeah, not sure. What counts as a person? So let's forget about history. What about today? Can we just count the people? They're here, right? We can count them, but we don't count them every single day. Some countries have a census, but that census isn't done constantly, right? There's not a running tally of it. So even if we had an estimate of the population for the census year, then we have to estimate between them. We can extrapolate as to what the population might be at a particular time based on past censuses, but this won't be perfect. And unless we know what the future census is going to be, again, it's going to be an estimate. So this can further be informed by other metrics, right? So we talk about things like number of houses, voter registration, school enrollment, water consumption. There's all sorts of things we can do to sort of infer what that population might be or what the trends might be. A direct estimate is the actual number from a census, and otherwise it's basically inferred with the help of some other factors like the ones I just mentioned. So while it's unlikely that the actual number reached 8 billion exactly on November 15th, it probably happened somewhere around then with a pretty sort of wide margin of error there. As a few weeks have gone by since that happened, it's become slightly more likely that we've actually past 8 billion by the time we're recording, and even more likely that it's actually past 8 billion by the time you listen to this. So practically speaking, we could just say 8 billion now, and you can couch that language to demonstrate your level of uncertainty as you want, but you kind of have to do less couching as the time comes on and becomes just that much more likely that it's happened. In 2011, the UN gave a 1% error for their estimate, which worked out to be about 6 months. I don't know exactly what the error is for their 2022 number, or if they're much better, but it's probably safe to say that by around like May of next year, we can be pretty certain that there are 8 billion people. But by the same logic, it may have happened as early as May of this year, even though it's slightly more likely to have taken place in November or closer to November.
That's a huge range.
Yeah, it's kind of massive just because we don't really know, right? There's a lot of people. So we don't know if it hit 8 billion on the 15th, but you know what we know even less? Who the 8 billionth baby is.
Oh, yeah, no kidding.
So in 2011, we did this too. With the 7 billionth person, there are a number of people who are claimed to be the 8 billionth person born. And this is absolute nonsense. This is totally absurd. So the honor is usually bestowed upon the first person born on November 15th in 2022, right? That's kind of the metric you would use for it. So this itself is very sketchy because of time zones, the imprecision of measuring the instant when a baby exits the birth canal. I've seen this twice and it's not super obvious, the exact millisecond. And consider that there are about 256 births every minute in 2016. So basically 4.3 births per second, so you realize how difficult it is to narrow it down very precisely.
And you'd also have to add in how many people are dying.
Oh, yeah. It's
right?
like, oh, you're the 8 billionth, and you're the 8 billionth too, because someone died between the two of you. But now another kid was born before someone else died, so we're at 8 billion and 1. So we're in the clear again. So it's a silly thing to do at the start of the new year. It makes even less sense to do it on November 15th, 2022, because no one is really claiming that the first baby born in that day was the 8 billionth. The claim is that that's the day where it's more likely that that's going to be crossed, right? And there was never a second that was precise there. So Yahoo News gives the honor to Vinis Mabadsag of Tondo, Manila, who was born at 1:29 a.m. local time. The Philippine Commission on Population and Development, POPCOM, posted on Facebook that they had chosen her to symbolically mark the 8 billionth person. So it seems they at least understand that it's symbolic, and I like that they actually say it that way.
Yeah, that's good. Let the people have their own numbers.
Yeah. CBS says that the 8 billionth baby born was in the Dominican Republic. They showed a picture of the baby and even had some footage in a video. And they don't give the baby's actual name or anything, which I thought was a bit odd. But then I saw a Guardian article which mentioned that the 8 billionth baby was named Damien. So he had a cute little
great.
shirt.
It's the demon child.
Shouldn't they just call the kid 8 billion? Wouldn't that make it easier for everyone?
That'd be nice if they had a word for it. So he has a cute little shirt that says 8,000 millones or 8 mil millones. So I was a bit surprised that there's no Spanish word for billion. So they kind of had to break it up. So estimating the current population is very difficult. Estimating past populations is even more difficult. Estimating future populations, even harder. It hasn't happened yet because we'll never know for sure. So we can see trends, but it's hard to know specifically. That said, there's sort of a growth rate in the global population which is slowing. So it's still going up, but the rate at which it's going up is slowing, if that makes sense. This means that we are likely to take longer to get from 8 to 9 billion than we did to get from 7 to 8 billion. How much longer is debatable. The UN estimates we will reach 9 billion by 2037. The UN estimates that the annual world population growth peaked in 1968 with a rate of 2.1%. So certainly at the time, so, sort of in the 60s, the concerns about population explosions were more common. As an example, the 1973 film Soylent Green predicts an overpopulated world, which is devastated by pollution and global warming. And it's based on the 1966 novel Make Room, Make Room. So the rate is now 1.1%, and it's estimated that it'll eventually go to 0, after which the world population will decrease. So what you'll see reflected in fiction is going to be reflective of the concerns of the time. The concerns of the time are somewhat influenced by actual science of the time.
I know you were speaking sort of colloquially, but when you said, it's hard to estimate the current population, harder to estimate the past, and even harder to estimate the future.
Yeah.
Well, clearly it's probably easier to estimate the present than the future.
Absolutely.
And the past. Now,
Absolutely.
whether the past is harder than the future, I think it depends how far back you go, obviously, right? If you go a little bit further back, it's probably decently easy, and it depends how far in the future you go.
Yeah, I mean, if you're estimating the past from a time we have records, it's always probably going to be a little easier than estimating the future. But
I think
tomorrow's population probably easier to predict than 100 years ago. So.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just and you already know, just wanted to add that nuance and precision. Yes. I think the future stuff is very interesting, depending on whose projections you listen to. As you said, the rate is still positive, which means numbers go up.
Yeah.
But it's decreasing, so it means the rate at which they go up is itself going down.
Yeah.
And so you have these things like, well, will Nigeria be the most populous country by 2100? Right.
Yeah.
Will India pass China within like a decade or two? And the States is one of the few so-called Western democratic countries that's actually increasing in population, partly due to immigration, but for other reasons too. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see how the world changes in the next decades.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some people that still have concerns about negative impacts of overpopulation, their impacts on things like climate change. That's a reality, of course. But population declines themselves could also have negative impacts as well.
Adam, Elon is doing all he can personally.
Yeah, there's only so much an individual person can do. But yes, it's a concern. And people look at this differently, and it's how much you weigh different risks and different problems. So I'm not to go into all the specifics and tell you conclusively, whether it's good or bad overall if the population happens to go up or down. But it's complicated, and the better way to say it is there are good aspects and bad aspects to both of these situations, but let's not pretend that there are no negative aspects to a shrinking population. So Canada's fertility rate in 2020 was at an all-time low of 1.4. So that means for every woman, she has an average of 1.4 children, and the rate to keep the population constant is generally considered to be 2.1. Canada's population is only able to grow because of immigration. So our population is still growing. But globally, this only works because some countries have fertility rates that are above 2.1. And the countries that have rates below 2.1 generally have immigration. And those that don't have a lot of immigration have populations that drop, basically. So when will the world peak? We don't know for sure. The UN estimates this will be when we reach 10.9 billion people, which is going to be around 2100, and this would include basically greater increases in Africa, less increases in Asia, following with the current trends. Those trends could, of course, change. This is an estimate. Other things could peak earlier or later. Depends. There's people that have higher or lower value estimates for this. We'll see what happens technologically, culturally. All sorts of factors could influence, right? The current world population is around 8 billion. If you want a specific number, you'll probably be disappointed. Have you ever tried to count to 8 billion? If you did so at a rate of counting once per second, you would reach 8 billion in 253 and a half years, at which point the Earth's population may very well have peaked and gone back down under 8 billion, or you yourself may be dead, barring some improvement in human lifespan, which would, of course, itself drastically change the Earth's population.
Yes, I think if you manage the longevity of the 200 plus years, chances are,
something. Either now there's people are living so long they're having more kids, or people stopped having kids because they're living for, I don't know, lots of things can happen. But just say 8 billion. It's close to 8 billion, even if the milestone wasn't reached exactly on November 15th, 2022. It's going to happen at some point soon.
Thanks, Adam. And to all our listeners, hoping you're having a safe and happy holiday season. And until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, cuboids. I hope you get what you want under your Christmas tree, or you get dragged to hell, whatever makes you happy.
Stay classy and happy crumble, everybody.
Happy holidays. We'll talk to you soon, folks.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
Cristina is going to talk to us about whether Coca-Cola, let me try to pronouncing that the correct way.
Before he began his tenure as a pitchman for Coke. Tenure.
Yeah.
He had already supplanted a bevy of competitors to become the standard representation of Santa Claus before he began his tenure.
No.
He had already supplanted a bevy of competitors to become the standard representation of Santa Claus before he began his tenure as a pitchman for Coke.
Well,
It's psychological now.
Yes. Yeah, I know. Well, it was fine. You said it the right way, but you paused to make sure it sounded right to the universe.
His tenure. He had already supplanted a bevy of competitors. I'm laughing already.
So Adam now agrees it's 2.1. You can also add...
I don't agree it's 2.1, but I agree the consensus is that we call it 2.1.
Okay.
I don't accept that it's not 2.
All right.
I think there's a caveat there that we're not counting children as not having children if they die, which I think is not the right way to do it from a math point of view, but I accept that from a population point of view, that's what we're using.
Do you think population estimate demographers
You know someone has to edit all this shit, right?
Okay, so Adam's going to retake it and say 2.1.
Okay.